Coming up on Over a Barrel, we are monitoring events as they are unfolding. Will the tariffs for Canada, Mexico, China, and beyond go into effect or not? We've just heard what the president has said from his own mouth moments ago. Those details and a whole lot more right here on Over a Barrel, which starts right now. Welcome to the program. I'm Matt. He's Patrick. Thanks so much for joining us on this extremely busy day when it comes to news that could impact crude oil prices and gas prices across the United States, possibly even beyond. Patrick DeHaan, Senior Petroleum Analyst for Gas Buddy and the co-host of this particular program. Patrick, thanks so much for being here. Obviously, as always, let's go ahead and dive right into it. We have a lot of developing stories that are taking place right now with regard to crude oil, the potential of impact for tariffs, creating some crude oil pricing issues, and even the generalized overall economy, since we trade an awful lot with Canada and Mexico and China. Let's talk about what is expected to happen. It's developing as we are recording this podcast. What's the very latest that you're seeing right now?
Well, Matt, according to you and according to CNBC and other outlets who are watching the president talk from the White House in real time, the tariffs have now been confirmed by Trump. They are going ahead, effective at midnight tomorrow. That's just hours away. There's going to be a major impact on fuel prices, especially in New England, places like Vermont, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Those areas import refined products, things like gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel from the Irving Oil Refinery in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. And with those refined products now likely to be tariffed at 10%, it's going to mean a very quick impact, Matt. The next cargoes of supplies are going to be 10% more expensive. So if you're in New England, you're likely to see things like gasoline, diesel prices jumping in the next couple of days. It will be the fastest response there. I would look for also increases potentially in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and Rockies. But Matt, there's a big difference here. Those areas, the impact is going to be on crude oil that feeds into refineries. It could take several weeks for that trickle down to happen in areas of the Great Lakes, the Midwest, and the Rockies. So again, two profoundly different outcomes here. The Northeast, fast, big punch of 20 to 50 cents a gallon in retail prices in the Northeast, whereas for the Great Lakes, the Rockies, and the Midwest, a more slower effect, 2 to 3 weeks, and an impact potentially much softer, maybe 5 to 15 cents a gallon. Overall, Matt, the stock market plummeting because this could mean a slowdown, a major slowdown in the economy. And even that potential slowdown in the economy could reduce demand, which could reduce the impact of some of these tariffs. But as you mentioned, what a Monday. I feel like I need to have the coffee brewing at this point because there's a lot of headlines that are going to be dodging. And by the way, while Trump has said these are going through as planned, there are still 8 hours left in the day, 9 hours left in the day, that there's still a development that could happen, especially if, the Canadian government, Mexican government really might feel pushed very suddenly to bring concessions. But earlier, I was reading the Wall Street Journal reporting Canada and Mexico don't know what the Trump administration even wants anymore. So is that going to be something factored as well? But you know what? You're the guy that wears the news hat. How do you feel on a day like today trying to navigate all these headlines?
And you and I were scheduled to record this podcast, and it just so happened to coincide with this I won't call it an impromptu news conference, but whatever the case may be, the president making these statements. You may see my eyes jumping around on the screen if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening to us on Spotify, you can't see that part, but I am monitoring about 6 different channels right now, everything from financial networks onto the standardized news networks at this point. And I have all of that going in my right ear. That's a very normal thing for me whenever I anchored news back in the day. So I kind of feel like I'm right on the edge of the news desk getting ready to report something super important here at the moment. But the way I'm reading into this and the body language that I'm particularly seeing is that is this a negotiating tactic of President Trump's? He is known for that. He is known to push things down to the wire in an effort to, basically get his way on whatever it is that he's trying to do. And, is that what's going to happen at this point? Well, that's a great question. We've got a handful of hours left as of the time of this recording to find out exactly what's going to happen. But he seems very adamant with his body language, indicating, and the tone in his voice that I've heard, he is very adamant that these tariffs really are going to happen as scheduled. He says they are already in place. They are for sure going to happen. 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods starting at midnight tonight. By the way, the Dow Jones Industrial, I hesitate to even throw out a number because it is moving back and forth in a pretty volatile way. Right now, it's down more than 700 points and continuing to fall. By the time we get done recording this podcast, who knows, right? It could be down only a couple of hundred positive or down more than 1,000. We're just going to have to watch it and find out on that aspect. But there's a lot going on, to say the least. There in that particular news conference as well, a lot about Ukraine, obviously what took place in the Oval Office on Friday, and a lot of different aspects. And that's kind of when I started noticing the Dow Jones Industrial begin falling in those particular aspects, because it almost looked like Wall Street itself was kind of like, let's make a deal. Let's get some peace going. And the president doubling down and saying, nope. The people want peace of Ukraine. Russia wants peace. I want peace, but Zelensky, doesn't want peace. And all of a sudden, the Dow is like, woo, it just starts going down there and starts falling. So there's a lot of things to digest in a very, very rapid fire type of a situation here. You're saying that gas prices, you think, will start to be impacted, especially in the northeastern part of the country, soonest or fastest, if you will. And you're saying 25 cents minimum. That's what you're thinking may. Did I hear that correctly? I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly.
Well, hopefully I gave it a ballpark. I think I said 20 to 50 cents a gallon,
Okay.
Potentially. And that's going to vary. Again, the devil's in the details. There's still a lot of moving parts. Canada could retaliate. Mexico could retaliate. So it will be fastest for sure in the Northeast, much faster than it will be in the Great Lakes, the Midwest. Again, the key difference here is that we're talking about refined fuels that are flowing from Canada into the US. We're not talking at this moment about oil that flows from Canada to the US. There will be different impacts because of the different flows of what we're talking about. And because gasoline deliveries, are happening pretty frequently from that refinery in New Brunswick. We're talking about the next shipment potentially, sometime tomorrow, because shipments are pretty regular.
Okay.
That the price then will be reflective of a higher price. And we saw this last time around, Matt, when Irving Oil and distributors in the northeastern United States warned their customers hours ahead that this is going to hit you really quickly, because as soon as these tariffs come into law, these executive orders could be effective as of midnight. Guess what? Any product crossing the border after midnight then is going to be subject to that, and distributors are going to pass that cost along very quickly. But I like how you said, if my eyes are moving around, I'm thinking the same thing too here. We are trying to digest these headlines, but it's tough to keep up with. So
yeah, there's no question my eyes are moving around because I've got so many boxes on a screen watching different networks. The Dow's down almost 800 points now. Now the analysts are coming on and the consultants in the different networks and saying, here's what he's really saying of their particular opinion. So much going on, and so basically the Northeast, because the refinery is on the Canadian side. You're saying the gasoline, if I heard that correctly, coming across the border. That's why it's going to see something. But the crude oil so fast, but the crude oil coming into the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and other aspects, well, that takes some time to get into the quote unquote pipeline, if you will, as far as the refinery aspect of things, and that's why there may be a slower delay. If all of this, and this seems to be across the board, everything from the British news media that I'm watching to conservative, liberal, and touted centrist news.
Matt, by the way,
outlets.
look at that on screen, the volatility index that I just threw up there, the CNBC. Now we are down almost 800 points. The volatility index has surged, 18%.
You would almost think that the markets were just like, you would almost think that the markets were just basically like, okay, Trump's actually probably, it's a negotiating tactic. The tariffs aren't actually going to happen. And now all of a sudden, he himself, a mere handful of hours before midnight, is saying, oh no, they're going to happen. They're already in place. There's nothing that's going to basically stop that. His words, not mine, during the press conference. And he's like, okay, no, this is going to happen. Now it's almost like the markets are kind of going, oh, wait, he was serious? And now you're seeing that reaction. So this immediate impact, if you will, and talking about all of these aspects, Midwest, Great Lakes areas, the crude oil has to flow through and then be refined. So there
Right.
will be
So
a slightly lesser time frame. Let me rephrase that: a slightly longer time frame is what I meant to say there.
I think both
Before
of those made
motorists will
sense,
see
but
some
yeah,
impacts.
yeah, exactly. I mean, the crude flows down; it's stored for potentially weeks before it's refined, so there may be a slight delay. And by then, I mean, the interesting factor about this is Canadian producers may end up bearing some of the burden here because they have no other market to sell their crude oil into. So if U.S. refiners start to balk at buying Canadian oil, or they start to prefer other types of crude oil, Matt, if they can get them, the Canadians are going to have to do something, offering a bigger discount to get them to buy Canadian oil. So that's where there's a potential risk here. Canadian oil producers may have to increase the discounts they're giving out because this tariff on Canadian oil may make it more attractive for some refineries to be able to switch who they're buying crude oil from, and they may select somebody that isn't a Canadian oil seller. But not every refinery, very few of them, I would say, in this region I've described, the Great Lakes, the Midwest, and the Rockies, not a whole lot of refineries are going to have any options here, right? It's not like you can just airdrop supplies of cargo via plane, right? These are massive pipelines, and you can't replace them overnight. So, but the interesting dynamic here is still that the Canadians partially will probably have to offer bigger discounts.
Let me ask you to take a look while we're kind of digesting this out. As of the last time, a month ago, it was supposed to be a 10% tariff on Canadian crude oil. This time around, I don't see, relatively speaking, or in the current moment, anyone speaking about a 10% tariff on crude oil. Even the president making the comment 25% period. Are you able to see anything that would indicate that the tariff specifically on crude oil is a different level than the other commodities and products that the 25% would be impacting? Is that anything that you're coming across right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if anyone has a terrific answer because Trump hasn't mentioned it. All he did was basically implement the tariffs, right? Last month, he said they're going to go ahead, and he also carved out energy as a 10% tariff. And then he paused all of that. So the thinking is, because he paused that, because that was the thinking that he put a pause on, now that that pause is over, my thinking is that that is the way it's going to move forward, still with a 10% tariff on energy and 25% on everything else. If there's a difference here, there's obviously, if Trump clarifies whether it's going to be 10 or 25% on energy, we're assuming, my assumption is 10%. Again, because that's what he said last time and paused it. If that changes, it's really going to change the calculus and make the potential increases in gas prices in areas like the Northeast even more profound.
So
Then it
you're
would
20
probably
to
be
50
closer to,
cent. You're
then
20
it's
to
going to be
50.
towards the top of that range.
Okay. So you literally took the words out of my mouth. Your 20 to 50 cents a gallon was based on a 10% mindset of tariff, not a 25%, to be
Correct.
fully clear on what we're discussing here, correct?
Correct. It would
Okay.
probably be somewhere in the low to mid part of that range. The only reason I say up to 50 cents, 22 up to 50 cents, is because there's also noise happening as we're transitioning to summer gasoline, as demand is going up, and as refiners are doing maintenance, because all of that can really change the levers, right, that are going on at the same time. So I would tend to believe it'd be somewhere between 20 and 30 cents to start off, Matt. But as we get into the seasonality, the tariffs could have more of a bite. So in April, the impact could be 40 cents, whereas tomorrow it could be more like 25 cents.
So if I'm paying 270 a gallon right now here in the upper Midwest, the upper South, whatever we want to call the area of the world that I happen to be in, a month from now, you were already predicting that normal creep up of pricing because of the refinery switchover, the maintenance, and all the other stuff to reformulated gasoline. You were going to have to potentially add an additional amount on top of the standardized spring increase that we are looking at. You're thinking 20 cents a gallon, 30 cents a gallon, up to 50 cents a gallon. Is that how I'm
So
understanding you?
let's clarify, what region are you referring to? Just so that I know, because we
Uh,
laid out the Northeast.
So I would look at the Midwest, Upper South. So let's say
Completely
Missouri,
different.
Illinois.
Completely different. Yep. So that 20 to 50 is only applicable to the Northeast.
Gotcha.
The Great Lakes markets, the Rockies, the Midwest are all in a different bucket, but I would estimate somewhere of an impact there of anywhere from 5 to 20 cents a gallon. Most probably would be in the 10 to 12, maybe 10 to 13 cent a gallon region. Keep in mind, the difficult thing about being able to assess this at the retail pump, basically, if you go to your pump tomorrow and if prices go up in the Midwest, there may be none of the tariff already playing out at the pump because prices cycle, right? We've long discussed the price cycling in the Midwest and the Great Lakes and some areas of the Rockies. If prices do go up, depending on where this happens and how quickly, it's going to be a little bit tough to explain, well, hey, this is normal price cycling versus this is price cycling plus the tariff implemented. So all in all, Matt, and again, I said the impact could be much slower in the Midwest, the Rockies, and the Midwest. So I just want to call that out. It could take a couple of weeks for those impacts, the tariffs, to be passed along in those areas.
All right, so let me move on to a geopolitical thing where it looks like the markets are really reacting. I don't know about the crude oil markets, but Lord knows the stocks are certainly reacting very strongly to this. That's the Ukraine situation. President Trump is saying that he will update the Ukraine deal in tomorrow evening's speech to a joint session of Congress on whether the Ukraine mineral deal is dead. Quote, I'll let you know, unquote. That's certainly an interesting, those are his words, quote, I'll let you know, unquote. There's a lot there. There's a lot there we could unpack in a multitude of different directions. But for now, it doesn't look like we're going to find out one way or another until he speaks it out loud tomorrow evening. And the markets are really jittered, for lack of a better term there. They're very jittery today as a result of the different things. Markets don't like that instability. We both know that. That's a very common reaction to any kind of instability, geopolitical, market, price points, whatever. A refinery goes down and you're the first on the air to say, hey, we're going to have a temporary increase in prices wherever that refinery goes down. It's just there's a lot of jitteriness there and a lot of supply there and a lot of different aspects there that you have to take into consideration for everything. So, all right, let's role play that out for just a quick moment. What everybody was hopeful that there was going to be peace between Russia and Ukraine. If it doesn't happen, as the markets are now fearing, because that's what I'm seeing across multiple screens. The markets are reacting to a multitude of things out of that press conference that he just held. This is one of them. No peace. What impact, if any, on crude oil prices going forward over the coming months?
I mean,
it's a loaded question, I know.
Yeah. So run that by me one more time, because as I'm thinking about it.
What impact? Here's the main key, the key takeaway here. For the first time in modern history, the United States official standpoint really isn't in line with the European standpoint, Canadian standpoint, when it comes to what to do with Russia and Ukraine. There's a lot of turmoil, at least on the surface, for all of us to view between we have all been staunch allies for decades. If Ukraine doesn't go into a ceasefire as everyone was hoping, because remember, a couple of days ago they were supposed to be signing.
Ceasefire in Ukraine, right? More of this really has to do with the Russia angle, and the interesting development there. I don't know if you saw, but there has been consideration by the Treasury Department to potentially loosen sanctions on Russian energy. And of course, that would be a potentially large development, because while Russia's oil has been getting to the market, it's only really been countries like India and China that have been buying that crude oil. So if the sanctions the U.S. has been putting on Russia are eased, suddenly, countries are going to have a far easier time transacting that Russian crude oil, and that could certainly undermine the price of oil moving forward. So the Ukraine peace deal, that's potential. That's something to watch as a side note, because that could be one vehicle that Russia gets sanctions relief. Or if the U.S. just gives Russia sanctions relief, that's obviously going to have an impact as well.
A lot of things going. Everybody was expecting a mineral deal to be signed on Friday between Ukraine and the U.S., including, I would argue, President Zelensky of Ukraine and President Trump of Washington, D.C. That certainly didn't happen for the whole world to see in real time. That was not something that I've ever seen before cameras out of an Oval Office appearance, for sure. There's just a lot there. You also have the Israel and Hamas thing that is kind of wondering if it's going to become another powder keg situation. I know in the past you've said, hey, this, the markets have kind of already factored this in, or that's really not going to have an impact. Do you think there's a cumulative impact where you have so much turmoil all at once that it may overwhelm the calmness of a market and say, there's just so much turmoil where we don't know what to do, so we're going to factor in a what if scenario into the price point of crude oil?
Well, I think there's a lot of that already, speculation on what deal's going to happen, what deal's not going to happen, right? I mean, this is so much drama for the market that it's just a lot of noise, right? The market doesn't know, there's so many different things going on. By the way, we haven't even mentioned the fact that OPEC agreed today, OPEC Plus agreed after meeting virtually to start restoring some of the oil production cuts from 2023. So that's another complicating factor, Matt, is that, boy, between Russia potentially getting sanctions relief, the potential deal with Ukraine and how it plays a role, between the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, OPEC Plus agreed to start restoring oil production in April. So, oil prices have been plummeting today, over 2% at one point. Just a whole lot of uncertainty, a whole lot of levers that are all moving in seemingly opposite directions at the same time. And OPEC, that's a deal that could hold longer term impacts than a lot of these other issues that you and I are talking about, because it's a policy change amongst oil producers that, that could take a year for them as they slowly raise production back up. So just a lot going on here.
Speaking of OPEC, it was actually one of the things leading that I really wanted to talk with you about. We did not have a podcast this past week, and there's a very important reason for that. It was going to be the thing that I led with, and then all of that changed at last second as we were hitting the record button. Talk to us about your experience over the past several days.
Well, back in January, I received an email from OPEC about the workshop that they were going to put together on communications and robust data. And of course, Gas Buddy is an institution that has a lot of really terrific data on both gas prices that are reported to us voluntarily. We also have a lot of data on stations and a lot of data on consumption trends. And so I took part in a OPEC workshop on some of these communication factors and some of this data. Obviously, you and I have a podcast. Traditional media has really shifted in the last several years, and that's really what a lot of this workshop was about, to kind of understand the evolution and the media process. And obviously, consumers are getting more enlightened information from things like this podcast, from the Gas Buddy blog, and so OPEC did a really good job putting on a workshop to try and navigate what this means for the landscape of communications and how to effectively communicate their decisions. Something like today, they put out a joint statement, and it was rapid fire through the analyst community, and we could comment on it very quickly. So they're trying to be very transparent in sharing their information. And so that was a really interesting workshop that took place in Vienna just late last week. In fact, I just arrived yesterday after long travels, but a really good workshop and a really good chance to be in the same room with journalists, with a lot of analysts like myself who, pour over this data from OPEC. Obviously, OPEC is still a major force when it comes to global oil production. OPEC still controls about a third of the world's oil supply through all of their members. So it's a very relevant organization, and I was very happy to be able to take part.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm sure it was a lot of fun, and I'm sure you haven't done bad. You've got to be jet lagged, I would assume. What was it?
It wasn't bad, Matt,
difference?
but at the same time, it wasn't quite 75-degree weather yet in Vienna. So, it did require some sacrifice. Thankfully, it was nice to get out of my office, but certainly very nice to be invited to take part in such a workshop. And I think I am jet lagged. I think last night I woke up 3 times in the middle of the night because the time difference is still 6 hours. So, But it was a wonderful opportunity to partake with fellow analysts in the workspace, and it was really well done.
I'll throw out as we're wrapping up here, the Dow Jones Industrials is down, pushing toward 900 points at this particular point, and the president also made a comment during his speech at the White House moments ago about potentially also adding agricultural tariffs on April 2nd. That got Patrick so excited, he decided to jolt the
I
camera
dropped
there
my
for just a
phone.
moment and dropped his phone.
It's
Uh,
vibrating so much, but yeah, Matt, I read that as well. So another interesting development yet, is that it's going to make it harder. U.S. farmers are going to be able to produce more for the U.S. markets, but just so many headlines, Matt. When
yeah.
there are so many headlines, can a business really plan for the future? That this, and again, this is why that volatility index, for those that don't track the VIX, the volatility right now today is through the roof. Just there's too much going on in the market. But Matt, that's another thing. Give folks the background on those agriculture tariffs you were mentioning.
Yeah, agriculturally speaking, Mexico and Canada, we do import a lot of our fruits, veggies, and even some grains. So, especially with Mexico and our fruits and vegetables, basically bananas to avocados to bell peppers. I mean, just about everything that you've got in the fresh produce department. At most times of the year, it's not coming from America because we don't have a lot of places we can grow bananas. And so the key is, if you're looking at that, then what you're also noticing with inflation when it comes to the agricultural price products in your local grocery store, that's not counting any potential tariffs that may or may not go into effect. So as inflation continues to grow, we may run into problems with there. I said that I paid $7 2 weeks ago for a dozen eggs, that same exact location, the same
Right.
exact brand, the same exact dozen of eggs, only it was in a different carton, is now $7.45 per dozen that I just paid this week. So we are seeing things beginning to change. That's a cumulative impact on the standardized consumer as well as businesses, because the consumer has to pay for food, gasoline, all of
Yep.
these things. There is a cumulative impact when it comes to stretching that dollar for a paycheck. And so you obviously something that, yes, agriculturally speaking, may not impact crude oil directly, but we understand that if you're a business, a consumer, or anything in between, there is a cumulative impact there. It's going to have an impact, and we understand that here. It's going to impact us as well. That's both Patrick and myself and you and anybody who's listening and watching. So we're monitoring all of that. Got to tell you, it's been a hot minute since I've been having 8 different monitors in front of me, and I'm like, put me in, coach. That news anchor in me is kicking in just a little bit here, and I'm ready to cue the music and say good afternoon and thanks for joining us. So this is where we are right now, and so we're going to keep monitoring that. If we need to do an extra podcast, Patrick and I will find time this week to make sure we keep you up to date, even if we have to do anything live. We will, of course, stay on top of everything here on Over a Barrel. Crude oil prices, as Patrick mentioned, the Northeast. That's I guess the one to keep an eye on for first price point changes as we wrap here.
Yeah, that could be within the next 48 to 72 hours. If these tariffs do move forward, Trump has said they will. We never know if there's going to be an 11th hour appeal or something like that.
Right.
But yes, the northeastern U.S., Maine, Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, into areas like New York Harbor, down into the Northeast, maybe New Jersey, New York areas would see some of this as well. So that's where the impact is going to be swiftest. If you're in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, or the Rockies, you're not going to have an immediate impact, but keep an eye out. We will definitely be here to let you know when we see things coming down the pipeline. For now, as Matt said, this is going to be a highly volatile situation here over the next couple of days. Make sure you follow us. I'm Gas Buddy Guy on X. He's Over a Barrel Matt on X. Keep tuned to what's going to happen, because there's a lot of different things that we'll be navigating. And as Matt said, we may go live here on the Over a Barrel channel on X as well. So stay
And
tuned.
on YouTube, Gas Buddy YouTube as well.
Yeah,
We'll
Gas
just
Buddies YouTube channels or Facebook. We may pump out some videos just to keep the information coming. So would love if you would turn your alerts on for those accounts, especially this week. Follow, and subscribe us, and hopefully we can hear from you soon. Podcast at gasbuddy.com is our email address again. But we're on it. Matt and I are here. I'm back stateside. So if you see me here, we'll keep the updates flowing. But for now, certainly some pretty rough news for motorists coming. The only good news, Matt, we really didn't talk about gas prices, but 48 of the nation's 50 states saw gas prices moderately declining last week. That might
Seems
be
short-lived now.
thinking. Yeah, it might be wishful thinking that that'll happen again, but we're here to cover it all.
All right, here on Over a Barrel. Stay tuned. We'll talk again soon.